The cabin stood like a stubborn gray stone, clenched in the fist of the vast northern forest. For 20 years, it had been Elias Thorne's sanctuary, his retreat from a world that had grown too loud, too demanding. He wasn't a hermit in the truest sense. He made the 2-hour trip to the nearest town for supplies once a month. But his heart, his rhythm, belonged here, tethered to the pulse of the wilderness. He was a man etched by weather and solitude, his face a roadmap of quiet, contemplation, his hands calloused from chopping wood and tending his small garden. His movements were deliberate, economical, like those of the forest creatures he respected. The forest wasn't just scenery to Elias. It was a living entity, breathing with the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the cry of the hawk. And for the last 5 years, it had held a secret known only to him and the wind, the wolves. He knew them not as abstract dangers, but as individuals, a family. There was Kalen, the alpha male, immense and charcoal dark, with eyes like chips of old gold. That missed nothing. His authority was absolute, carried not through aggression, but a silent, unwavering presence. Then there was Anya, the alpha female, leaner, quicker, silver-tipped fur gleaming in the moonlight. She was the strategist, the vigilant heart of the pack. He'd watched their pups grow over the seasons, wrestling shadows, clumsy bundles of fur transforming into sleek hunters. He never interfered, never approached. His presence was simply there, a silent observer on the periphery of their world. The first winter he'd truly noticed them close was brutal. Snowdrifts climbed halfway up his cabin walls, and the silence of the forest deepened into something hungry. Game was scarce. One evening, staring out his frost-laced window, he saw them, ghosts against the white expanse, moving with a desperate slowness near the edge of his clearing. They were thin, their ribs faintly visible even through thick winter coats. Kalen stood sentinel while the others, including 2 struggling yearlings, sniffed fruitlessly at the frozen ground. Elias felt a pang, not of pity, but of shared understanding. He knew hunger. He knew the bite of cold that seeped into the bones. That night, he did something he hadn't planned. He took the leftover venison stew, rich with root vegetables he'd carefully stored, and carried it out, not to the clearing's edge, but 50 yards deeper into the trees, near a game trail he knew they sometimes used. He didn't linger. He left the pot, turned, and walked back, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on his back. The next morning the pot was empty, licked clean. There were tracks, circling the spot, hesitant at first, then decisive. He felt no triumph, only a quiet acknowledgement. He did it again a few nights later, with scraps from a rabbit he'd snared, always placing it away from his cabin, never making it a direct offering, more like a resource left for the forest itself. This became a silent ritual during the harshest weeks of that winter, and the one that followed. He never saw them take the food, but the evidence was always there. He noticed subtle shifts. The low warning growls he sometimes heard when chopping wood near the forest edge became less frequent. Occasionally, he'd catch a glimpse of Anya watching him from the dense undergrowth, not with fear, but with a calm, assessing gaze. Kalen remained aloof, a powerful shadow melting back into the deeper woods whenever Elias stepped outside. Trust wasn't spoken. It was woven thread by careful thread through seasons of mutual, distant respect. Elias never sought them out, never tried to close the distance. He understood the fragility of their wildness, the importance of the boundary. His kindness was offered without expectation, a quiet nod to the shared struggle for survival in this beautiful, unforgiving land. Then came the third winter of this unspoken arrangement. It started early and hit hard. An ice storm coated the trees in glittering, heavy armor, snapping branches like matchsticks. The deer moved further south, seeking easier foraging. The rabbit population dwindled. Elias knew the pack would be struggling more than ever. He continued his discreet offerings, leaving larger portions now, venturing a little further each time to find sheltered spots where the snow wasn't as deep. One biting afternoon, while checking his snares deep in the woods, further than he usually ventured in winter, He found something that chilled him more than the wind. Tracks, human tracks, heavy boots, clumsy compared to the natural gait of the forest dwellers. And beside them, the distinct, sinister impression of a steel leg-hold trap hastily concealed beneath a light dusting of snow. Poachers. A cold fury rose in Elias. This wasn't just his sanctuary. It was their home. These men saw only pelts, profit. They didn't see the intricate dance of life and death, the intelligence in Kalen's eyes, the fierce maternal protection in Anya's stance. He carefully disabled the trap, his fingers numb, but his movements precise. He scanned the surroundings, finding 2 more nearby. He disabled them too, leaving them sprung and useless. As he worked on the third, a low growl rumbled from the dense thicket to his left, so close the vibration seemed to travel through the frozen ground. Elias froze. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. Not 10 yards away stood Kalen. He wasn't poised to attack. His stance was tense, alert, but not aggressive towards Elias. His golden eyes flicked from Elias to the disabled trap, then back to Elias. Behind him, partially obscured by snow-laden spruce boughs, Elias could make out the shapes of Anya and 2 other pack members. They were watching him, silent, intense. Time stretched thin. The only sounds were the sighing wind in the pines and Elias's own heartbeat, loud in his ears. He finished disabling the trap, laying the harmless steel jaws open on the snow. He didn't speak. He simply met Kalen's gaze for a long moment. It felt like an exchange, an understanding passing between them in the silent language of the wild. Then, Elias slowly straightened up and backed away, never turning his back completely until he was a safe distance away. The wolves didn't move until he had vanished amongst the trees. He knew then that things had changed. The poachers were a direct threat, not just to the wolves, but to the delicate balance he had come to cherish. He started patrolling more regularly, always armed with his old hunting rifle, not for hunting, but for presence. He found more traps, always disabling them, leaving them as a silent warning. He found spent shotgun shells near a fox den. He found carelessly discarded cigarette butts near a stream. These men were invaders, clumsy and dangerous. One evening, the air hung heavy and still, pregnant with snow. A mournful howl echoed through the valley, different from their usual calls. It was shorter, cut off, followed by a series of distressed yips and whines. It came from the direction of the ridge overlooking his cabin. Elias grabbed his rifle, a heavy flashlight, and plunged into the twilight forest. The snow muffled his footsteps as he climbed, guided by the continued desperate sounds. As he neared the crest, he smelled it, the sharp metallic tang of blood on the cold air. He slowed, moving from tree to tree, his senses on high alert. Then he saw them. 2 men, bulky in winter gear, stood over a struggling form on the snow. It was Anya. Her front leg was caught fast in a heavy-toothed trap, the chain anchored to a thick root. Blood stained the pristine snow around her. She snarled and snapped, her usual grace replaced by pain-fueled terror. Kalen was circling frantically just beyond the reach of the men, snarling, lunging, but hesitant to attack 2 armed humans directly. The rest of the pack were shadows further back, their distress palpable in their agitated movements and low whines. One of the men laughed cruelly, raising a heavy rifle. "Hold still, you bitch. Prime silver-tip pelt right here, Jed." The other man, Jed, kept a wary eye on Kalen. "Watch that big male, Carl. He looks mean." "Nah, they won't attack," Carl sneered, sighting down the barrel at Anya's head. Too scared. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. He couldn't let this happen. He stepped out from behind a massive pine, his own rifle held steady, not aimed, but visible. "Leave her be." Elias's voice was low, rough from disuse, but it carried authority in the stillness. Both men startled violently, spinning towards him. Carl kept his rifle half raised towards Anya, while Jed swung his own weapon towards Elias. "Who the hell are you?" Jed demanded, his face tight with surprise and anger. "This ain't your business, old man." "This is my valley," Elias stated calmly, his eyes locked on Jed's. "And those traps are illegal out of season. You're poaching." "Says who?" Carl spat, his gaze flicking between Elias and the trapped wolf. "Ain't nobody out here but us." "I'm here," Elias said simply. "And I saw your tracks. I've disabled 6 of your traps already. You're done here. Release the wolf and get out." Jed laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Or what, Grandpa? You gonna shoot us?" Elias didn't flinch. "I don't want trouble, but you won't harm her. Let her go." Behind the poachers, Kalen had stopped circling. He stood stock still, watching Elias. His golden eyes seemed to burn in the dim light. Anya had ceased her struggling, her breathing harsh, her gaze fixed on the man who had left food in the snow, the man who now stood between her and the poachers' guns. Carl shifted his aim slightly, pointing his rifle more definitively towards Elias. "Last chance, old-timer. Back off." Suddenly, a deep, guttural growl erupted, not from Kalen, but from the shadows behind him. One by one, the rest of the pack emerged from the trees, fanning out silently, forming a semicircle behind the poachers. They didn't charge, they didn't bark. They simply stood, shoulder to shoulder, a dozen pairs of eyes glowing faintly in the twilight, teeth bared in silent, menacing promise. The air crackled with tension. Kalen took a single, deliberate step forward, lowering his head slightly, the fur on his neck bristling. The poachers froze. Their bravado evaporated instantly, replaced by raw, primal fear. Surrounded, outnumbered by silent, powerful predators, with only one determined old man blocking their path, the odds felt terrifyingly real. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Jed swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously between Elias and the growing wall of wolves. All right. Easy now." He nudged Carl urgently. "Let it go, Carl. Let's just go." Carl, pale and sweating despite the cold, fumbled with the release mechanism on the trap chain attached to the root. His hands were shaking so badly it took him several tries. With a click, the chain came loose. Anya, despite her injured leg, scrambled backward with surprising speed, dragging the heavy trap with her, melting into the protective cordon of her pack. "Now get out," Elias commanded, his voice steady, though adrenaline coursed through him. He hadn't lowered his rifle. Two men needed no further encouragement. Practically stumbling over each other in their haste, they scrambled back the way they came, casting terrified glances over their shoulders at the silent, watching wolves. Their panicked flight was loud in the sudden quiet, crashing through underbrush, until the sounds faded into the distance. Silence descended once more, thick and profound. Elias lowered his rifle, his shoulders slumping slightly. He looked toward the pack. Anya was licking her wounded leg, whining softly. Kalen approached her, nudging her gently with his muzzle. The other wolves remained where they were, watching Elias. Slowly, cautiously, Elias took a step forward, holding his empty hands out, palms up. He stopped about 15 feet away. He wouldn't approach Anya. The trap was still on her leg, and she needed space. But he looked at Kalen. The big alpha wolf lifted his head. He looked directly at Elias, a long, unblinking stare. There was no fear in those golden eyes, no aggression. There was something else. Recognition. Acknowledgement. Elias couldn't be sure. Then Kalen did something Elias had never seen him do before. He dipped his head, just slightly, a barely perceptible nod, before turning back to nuzzle Anya. Elias understood. It was enough. He turned and walked back towards his cabin, leaving them to tend to their own. He didn't look back, but he felt their eyes on him until the trees hid him from view. He never saw those poachers again. Perhaps they reported him, but in this remote wilderness, his word against theirs, with illegal traps as evidence, likely held sway. Or perhaps they were simply too spooked by the silent fury of the pack they had underestimated. Anya recovered. Elias saw her a few weeks later, moving with only a slight limp, her silver coat gleaming under the winter sun. The trap was gone. They must have managed to work it off her leg somehow. The dynamic between Elias and the wolves shifted subtly after that night. The distance remained, The essential wildness was never breached, but the awareness was different. Sometimes, while working outside, he would sense them nearby. Not hiding, just present. He might catch Kalen's eye through the trees, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Occasionally, on clear moonless nights, he'd hear their chorus of howls rise from the ridge, and it sounded less like a haunting cry and more like an affirmation, a declaration of belonging that resonated deep within his own solitary heart. Misima Kaitra still left food out during the leanest times, but it felt less like an offering and more like sharing resources between neighbors bound not by fences or laws, but by the silent, unshakable tendrils of trust and kindness forged in the heart of the wild. Elias Thorne was still a man living alone in a cabin near the forest, but he was no longer truly solitary. He had found a connection deeper than words, a bond of respect with the wild heart of the woods, embodied by the silent, watchful presence of the wolf pack. And in their shared resilience, in the quiet understanding that passed between man and wolf, he found a profound and enduring peace. The forest held its breath around him, no longer just a place of solitude, but a place of silent communion.